Okay, well, I think we've given enough time. Welcome everybody to our February Fireside Chat. My name is Kirk Hanson. I'm your host. I'm the Director of Forestry for the Northwest Natural Resource Group. Also joined by Alex Dolk, our Program Outreach Coordinator, who's been managing all of these Fireside Chats over the past year. If you're new to our Fireside Chats, this is a monthly event that we host, just a 1 hour, very informal evening talking about different topics relating to small woodland management. Tonight's topic is discussing financial assistance programs that are available to small woodland owners, specifically the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, or EQIP, and the Conservation Stewardship Program, or CSP, both farm bill programs that are managed by the Natural Resource Conservation Service. What I'd like to do with this evening, and I'm hoping this will be as entertaining and edifying for me as it often has been, hopefully for you folks, because I'm going to turn the proverbial talking stick over to you in a little bit and invite folks to share their experience enrolling in working with specifically the EQIP and CSP programs. And I know that there are at least 9 or 10 of you that have worked with these programs, because you filled that out in the survey when you registered for this event. So you can't hide from us. So if you don't volunteer to share your stories tonight, we're likely to call on you. So you've been forewarned. So this will be a little more of one of our interactive Fireside Chats. But what I'd like to do is I'm going to give you kind of a quick overview of both EQIP and CSP, how the two programs work, how they can work together. I'm going to share some personal anecdotes. I've applied for both programs and currently have open contracts with both programs. Actually, truth be told, I spent all day today on my family's Bakota forest working on some projects related to an EQIP contract that we have. So I'll be talking a little bit about that. Then I'm going to take a little bit of a pause, and we have Rachel Santaolalla with us tonight. Got to look up your program again. Sorry, Rachel. Rachel has been working on something called the Conservation Program Explorer tool, forgive me, which is a clearinghouse of financial and technical assistance programs available to rural landowners. So we've invited her to share that with you, because it's a relatively new tool, a new resource that I think a lot of you will be interested in as you are looking for assistance with conservation on your land. And then after Rachel shares her program, we'll open it back up for folks to share stories of your experience with EQIP and CSP. So one thing I would like to ask you, even though some of you have already tipped your hand and let us know that you've applied for these programs, if you are interested and willing to share your story about EQIP or CSP, please put your name in the chat box, and then also list a few of the projects that were funded by either EQIP or CSP. And Alex is going to take a look at those comments in the chat box, and then we will call on you. What we'd like to do is make sure we get a good cross section of projects, so they're not just all about pre-commercial thinning, in other words, so we get a little more diversity, the types of stories and projects that people share. So hopefully that's clear. And then also, if you have any questions about these programs that come up during the chat, go ahead and put your questions in there, and Alex will take a look at those also, and we'll field those questions and make sure that people have hopefully a full understanding of these programs by the time we're done. So with that, again, welcome. And what I'd like to do is real quickly give you the hopefully 5 to no more than 8 minute distillation of EQIP and CSP, again, the Environmental Quality Incentives Program and the Conservation Stewardship Program. The reason we're focusing on these two programs is that in my experience, they both are two of the best funding programs for small woodland owners in the Northwest. And I'm not sure if there's anybody or very many people here from Oregon. If so, I want to provide one caveat that at least EQIP and presumably CSP are administered quite differently in Oregon than in Washington. Since 99.9% of my experience is in Washington, this is going to be a very Washington-centric conversation and again, explanation of how these programs work. If there are folks from Oregon, I invite you to talk about how the programs differ, your experience down in that state when we're done. So real quickly, EQIP and CSP. So like I mentioned, both of these are Farm Bill funded programs that are administered by the Natural Resource Conservation Service, the NRCS. I like to separate the two programs and qualify them a little bit differently. The EQIP program is where I like to send most small woodland owners who have an interest in implementing conservation projects on their land or have, let's say, a disturbed condition on their land that they need to correct. The NRCS identifies a broad range of what they call resource concerns. These could be concerns to vegetation, wildlife, water quality, air quality, soil quality, etc. And if you have a resource concern on your property, so in other words, one of these resources is impacted by presumably past management or maybe something that's happened during your ownership, you may qualify for funding to address those resources through EQIP. EQIP is often referred to as a cost share program in that if you are approved for funding, you receive a predetermined reimbursement for implementing different conservation practices. So what's important to know about this is that when you go to implement a project, you have to pay for all the costs up front. If you're hiring a contractor or buying materials, trees, tree cages, what have you, you have to pay for all those costs up front. And when the project is complete, the NRCS comes out, inspects the project, and if everything's been done to their specifications, you are then reimbursed again for that predetermined reimbursement rate. Those payment rates for practices, there's no smoke and mirrors here. They're all listed on the NRCS website, so you can Google EQIP payment rates and get usually it's a PDF document that lists all of the practices and all of the payment rates. And you can go through those and see, what per acre, per unit reimbursement you will receive. So that's a little bit about the cost share. To get into the application process, both EQIP and CSP receive applications on a rolling basis. So you can apply any time of year for either program. What's important to know is that you're not just applying to the Natural Resource Conservation Service. The first thing you have to do, if you haven't already, is set up your land as a farm, a quote unquote farm, official farm, with the Farm Service Agency or FSA. They also are a program of the USDA. So you have to go to them first, the Farm Service Agency, and establish your farm records with them. So they're going to require a certain amount of information from you, your income, the parcel number for your property, a few other things. And they then will develop a farm record for you within the USDA and assign you a specific farm number. So you have to do that first. Then you go to the NRCS and apply for EQIP funding. And then they check to make sure that you are an official farm with the Farm Service Agency. If all that's good, they take your application. And on that application, you don't state what specifically you're planning on doing, the types of conservation projects. It's purely an application to state your interest in applying for funding. Once the NRCS receives your application, they will send a field agent out to walk your land with you. It's a good idea to already know what you want to do. Do you want to pre-commercially thin? Do you have some road improvements that you need to make? Do you have some habitat structures like snags or down logs or habitat piles that you want to create, put up bird boxes? Again, you can look through that payment schedule, look at all of the different practices that you're eligible for, and pick the ones that seem like they'll address some of the resource concerns on your land. Have those kind of ready to go. Have a good notion of what you want to do ahead of time. However, when the NRCS field agent is out on your land, they'll also be looking for resource concerns. And it's really a conversation between the two of you about what it is ultimately that you should or can do. I think it's important to state that all of this is voluntary. So when the NRCS comes out, again, it's a conversation between you two, and you are not obligated to do anything that you don't want to do. They will propose some ideas, maybe you have some ideas, and ultimately it's all negotiated. Then the NRCS will take those ideas back with them, put them into a draft contract, and that contract will tell you, how many acres that you're planning on doing. This is something that, again, you'll negotiate with the NRCS, what the schedule is for the activity. And every EQIP and CSP contract are good for 5 years, so you can spread your projects out over a 5-year period. And then most importantly, what the payment rates are. So all of that is spelled out ahead of time before you're ever obligated to the program. You take a look at that, and if that looks good, that's what the NRCS will use to rank your application. And again, this is also important to know that just by applying, it's not a guarantee that you're going to get funded. This is a competitive funding process. You're competing against other small woodland owners out there. And the more that the practices on your land address the resource concerns that the NRCS has identified, the higher your application will rank. There's a few other things will also help your application rank a little higher. If you are a minority, if you are a woman-owned business, or as a woman own your land, you'll rank a little higher. Also, if you are a new, what the USDA considers a new farmer, if you've owned your forest land for less than 10 years, you're considered a newer beginning farmer. And there's a few other criteria in there also that will kind of help your application rank a little bit higher. The last thing that will help it rank higher is if you have a forest management plan that identifies all of these projects. Your forest management plan can also be funded by EQIP. So for those of you that don't have a plan or have an old plan that's more than 10 years old, it may be a good opportunity or a good idea for you to apply for EQIP funding to first have your management plan updated, identify these resource concerns, identify all the different conservation projects you can do, and then apply a second time for additional EQIP funding to go implement those conservation projects. So like I said, I usually send small woodland owners to EQIP first because it pays for a huge range of projects. I've listed off some of those: pre-commercial thinning, wildlife habitat structures, bird boxes, fixing roads, planting more diverse trees and shrubs, pruning, reducing fire risk, kind of on and on like that. And we'll hear about more of those tonight. And EQIP generally has the highest payment rate of the two programs. So maybe to make it a little bit clearer, I think EQIP is set up to address the bulk of the resource concerns on your land. And once you've done that, then the Conservation Stewardship Program is really about financially helping you continue to maintain those practices, as well as go a little bit above and beyond those practices. So let's talk a little bit about CSP, the Conservation Stewardship Program. It's different from EQIP in that you will receive, if you're approved for funding, you will receive, first of all, an annual conservation or stewardship payment. It's usually around $900, $1,000, $1,500, something like that. It's based on the number of resource concerns that you're already addressing on your land. And so you get that as an annual payment for 5 years. And then in order to qualify for CSP, you have to do, again, something a little bit above and beyond what you're already doing. And they refer to these as enhancements. So an enhancement is taking, say, the EQIP project that you've done and doing something a little more with that. An example of that is, and I'll share this with my land, is coming in and pre-commercially thinning a hardwood stand under EQIP, and then with the Conservation Stewardship Program, coming in and underplanting that hardwood plantation with shade-tolerant conifers in order to set the stage for long-term carbon sequestration. So that is a specific enhancement under CSP, planting for a high carbon sequestration rate. I'll illustrate that on my land here shortly. A couple other projects that I've done, I've planted a wildlife hedgerow on my Oakville forest using CSP. I've also planted a cultural resource plantation, so kind of ethnobotanical plantation. And the reason I chose each of these three activities, or these three enhancements, is they just coincidentally have the highest payment rates also. So for instance, these three programs each pay around $1,700, $1,800 per acre to implement these particular enhancements. So when you can also Google the CSP payment schedule and find a PDF document that lists all of the practices and all of the enhancements that CSP pays for. And what you'll notice is that CSP will pay for all of the same things that EQIP does, but typically at a much lower payment rate, either lower per acre or per unit payment rate. But there are these little gems in there, like I mentioned, planting for a high carbon sequestration rate. There's a pollinator habitat enhancement, the enhancement of again, cultural resource plantings, wildlife hedgerow. So you'll find these little gems that have a much higher payment rate. And if those are something you want to do and they're copacetic with the management of your land, then fantastic. But otherwise, again, I encourage folks to go to EQIP for kind of the heavy lifting. One of the other nice things about CSP is at the end of your 5-year contract, you have the opportunity to automatically renew that contract and roll it into another 5 years. But you do have to implement yet another new enhancement during that 5-year period. So it's a great way to keep your forest tuned up. I think it's a great kind of a 1-2 hit on your land, EQIP to deal with all the heavy lifting, CSP to continue to help underwrite the ongoing maintenance of those projects. Lastly, about the enrollment process, like I mentioned, it's open enrollment, but usually every fall, I think in Washington, it's usually in October, there's an application cutoff deadline by which time you need to be, again, registered with the FSA, Farm Service Agency, have your application in, and then the NRCS will go through the process of ranking everything. You do not want to wait until 2 weeks before the application deadline to get this process going. You will not be able to get your farm records set up that quickly or the application process run through that quickly. So if you are incentivized by this at the end of this fireside chat tomorrow, you should be making a phone call to your local NRCS agent or office and Farm Service Agency office and let them know that you're interested in EQIP and applying, and they'll walk you through the process. So I think actually before I get into sharing some of the details about my land, just for a talking heads break here and for a little more diversity, Rachel, if you're open to sharing your program, we'd love to hear from you. And again, Rachel has been working on a project called the Conservation Program Explorer tool. And Rachel, why don't you take a little bit of time and talk about that? And we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, thanks, Kirk. Hi, everybody. My name is Rachel Santaolalla, and I work with the Cascades to Coast Landscape Collaborative. It's a decentralized, self-directed partnership, and we're mostly volunteer-based. And we function in Western Oregon and Washington. And we manage 2 tools, or house 2 tools. One is a conservation habitat connectivity mapper tool, and the other tool is the one I'm going to present to you today called the Conservation Program Explorer. And I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen, show you our website. So the Conservation Program Explorer tool here, this is our website. And if you just, this is our homepage, I'll share this with you in the chat. And if you scroll down, you'll see our Conservation Program Explorer here. If you go down a little further, you can see the mapper if you're interested in that, more of a contextual sort of reference there. But this tool, you can go in here to start. This was created for private landowners of forest and agricultural lands so that they could easily browse conservation incentive programs. And you can see EQIP there. So we'll go in here, and it's currently built out for Washington. We started this, I took this over from somebody who was starting it in late 2020. We launched this Southwest Washington region and the Olympic region of Washington in November of 2021. And then several months ago, I think October or so, we finished building this out for the whole state of Washington, and Oregon is on its way. So it should be done in a few months here. So the way it works is once you get into sort of your state, you can select your county. I'll just select on the Northwest region here, and it'll open up a new browser tab. And then you can select which county you're in, what kind of land you're looking for a program for. Some folks have both agriculture and forest lands. So it's kind of the beauty of this. You can leave it blank if you want to see both. And then we focus on three main program benefit types. So we focused on things that programs that offer a financial incentive, free technical assistance, or a marketing and recognition component. There aren't very many of those compared to the financial and free technical assistance. But if you're looking for something to enhance your product, if you're selling timber or something of the sort, if you're looking for like an organic certification, that's where you can find that kind of thing. And if you've got a stream on your property, you can select yes here for a water-focused program. And then if you're just looking for something to offer you safe fencing or carbon capture, these are the things I put in before, EQIP being one of them. But you can enter a keyword there and hit search, and that's how that would work. So I'm going to go ahead and select a few things. Let's see, King County has quite a few programs. We'll go with forest, and you'll notice that as I select these drop downs, the number of programs are being updated. So let's look at financial benefits. We've got 45 programs so far, and I'll just say no, I'm not looking for a water-focused program. And then here are the list of programs under that criteria. It shows you who the provider is. So this Rural Forest Health Management Program is provided by the King Conservation District. It offers a financial and a free technical assistance component. And then there's just a little snippet of the program itself, forest resources for stewardship of small lots. If you're interested in something like that, you can select more details, and you'll see all that same information up here at the top, and then a larger description. And this is mostly taken by their program's website. Sometimes they're slightly edited to keep it a manageable size. And you can also see the eligibility requirement. And sometimes there's, if it's a financial benefit, I'll try and include as much of the financial benefit as I can. Sometimes I've got to leave it a little vague just because it can be very dependent on the project itself. And then you can see that we also include the contact information. So person's name, phone number, and email. This is the link to full program details. So their website, you click on that. And that's up here, yeah. So it'll just kind of open up a new browser tab to show you their website and more information about that program. I'm gonna go back to the program itself. You'll also notice a local service button here. So sometimes with certain programs, like this is a county level program, and for something like an NRCS or a GNR program that's state or federal level, there's a different contact person for specific areas. So the local service button is for something like that, just in case it can change and can be difficult to put one person's name here. So you might see a state level contact for the program, and then going to your local service will give you the local like FSA representative or NRCS representative if that's available. So I don't want to take up too much time. I just want to show you one more thing, that there's a planning importance aspect over here on the right. You can click on supporting organizations to find different groups that will help you with certain things like creating a forest management plan. NNRG, I'm pretty sure is on there. If not, let me know or I'll double check. But there are many different resources there to help you with your land planning. And then landscape characteristics. This is a link over to our mapper tool. If you own a lot of land and you're curious about sort of the context around your land, you can go there and see how your land is, interacting with the surrounding environment, and perhaps use some of these tools that you find to help kind of fit a puzzle piece of the bigger picture. And then lastly, if there's anything in here in this tool as you use it that is not easy for you or that could be improved, just drop me a line here. And you can also take our survey and let us know what you think. So I'm gonna stop sharing. And yeah, if you have any questions, you can email me. I don't want to take up our time because I'm excited to hear your stories. I've been seeing all of these programs for a while now, and I'm excited to hear from you all.
Okay, well, thanks Rachel. Yeah, I'd say if folks have questions for Rachel, I can put those into the chat also. And then as we get to the end of this first half here, we'll field some of those questions let's take it that way. So yeah, again, thanks for joining us. And I'm assuming you'll be able to stick around for the to the end here. It's only another half hour anyway. So okay, well, great, thank you. So yeah, what I like to do is, in order to kind of illustrate how EQIP and CSP work, on a real property with real projects, I'm going to take you to my family's Bakota land and show you some of the projects that we are working on there. Let's see here. Okay. So my family, of the 3 tracts of land that we own, the Bakota tract is our most recent. We bought this in 2018. And what you're looking at is a stand type map for this land. And it looks a little crazy. This property we acquired, it was kind of a problem child in that it had not been treated all that well in the past, and there's a real hodgepodge of different stand types. In the southern portion, that large block of green is primarily about a 30-year Douglas fir plantation that transitions to a mix of alder and Douglas fir. But all those other polygons there, those different colors, are kind of mixed hardwood stands, naturally regenerated alder, maple, as well as some really young plantations that were established just before my family bought the land. So kind of a mix of alder and Douglas fir and cedar. So the majority of the property, we're kind of dealing with these naturally regenerated hardwood stands that are at a really high density, as is common with naturally regenerated hardwoods. And then again, some young plantations that were just recently established that were having a lot of brush encroachment, Himalayan blackberry coming in. So, I realized that when we were prospecting for this land that we were going to have a lot of work to tune it up. But we bought it for 2 reasons. Bought it for a whole lot of reasons. But I think two of the reasons that made me feel good about investing in this land, considering how much work it was going to take to tune it up, was one, the land sits on Centralia silt loam, which is some of the most productive soils in Washington state, if not the entire world. And I told my parents at the time, who had originally invested in this, that we're doing as good farmers do. We're buying good soil. We're buying good earth here, good productive ground. The other part is I knew, being very familiar with both EQIP and CSP, that a lot of the maintenance or a lot of the tuning up that we need to do, the costs could in large part be covered by EQIP and CSP. So in 2019 or 2018, I applied for EQIP funding, and we were awarded funding for work to start in 2019. And so this map now shows the different management units and some of the activities that we engaged in. So that the green areas, like I mentioned, were dense to hardwoods and a lot of brush. And what I wanted to do was come in, the stocking was highly variable in these areas, generally fairly poor stocking of hardwoods and very low quality, a lot of storm damage to the hardwoods. So I wanted to come in and cut out a lot of the brush, cut back a lot of the poor quality hardwoods, and replant all those units with a mix of conifers. So given that the brush was so heavy, we used mechanical site preparation, had a flail mower come in and mow down all of the brush to create kind of an ideal planting site. So that was about 11.5 acres of the green forest management units. This red forest management unit, about 9.5 acres, was a Douglas fir plantation that was planted about 3 years before we bought the land. But there had been a lot of maple across this unit that when it was originally clear cut and replanted, the maple were cut, they sprouted as maple do, and a lot of those sprouting maples were threatening the Douglas fir that were planted there. So we got funding to do a stand release, come in, cut back the maples, and release the Douglas fir. Then this white unit had already been planted with Douglas fir and cedar, but there was a lot of Himalayan blackberry and other native brush species coming in, competing with the seedlings. So we got funding to do about 5 acres of seedling release. So cutting back competing vegetation, releasing those young 2-3-year-old conifers. And then lastly, there were a few units, these kind of yellow or orange units, where the stocking of alder was very high and warranted pre-commercial thinning to cut out some of the defective trees and get the spacing just right to allow the remaining trees to continue to grow and eventually become timber. So that is a quick overview of the 2019. To show you the finances behind this now, and you can see what I've done here is I listed all of the activities, and then I listed their total cost to me or to my family, and then the EQIP payment rate. So for instance, the site preparation, I think I had my numbers off in my prior map, but we did 18 acres of site preparation with the flail mower, mechanical site preparation. EQIP paid a little over $1,000, or no, I'm sorry, that was my cost, was $1,100 per acre for a total cost of $20,000. The EQIP paid $16,000 of that cost. Then I've lumped together all of the costs that went into replanting those same 18 acres with shade tolerant conifers. And between buying the tree seedlings, tree protectors, and paying the planting crew, it cost me about $8,700. But in this case, EQIP paid, the payment rates in EQIP were higher than my costs. So I got a little bit of cost savings in that I could use to offset some of the costs up here with the site preparation. Oops. And then looking down below here, after planting, of course, you want to do good seedling maintenance. And we've had 3 years of manual seedling release. So contract crews coming in and cutting around the seedlings at a pretty high cost to me, $2,700 each year. And EQIP is only paying about $1,100 of that. So when you look down at the very bottom, you can see how this all worked out, that for the 18 acres that we treated there, and I realized, yeah, this is just just treating the 18 acres. This isn't providing the cost for the pre-commercial thinning and some of the other activities. So for just that 18 acres to get those tuned up, our total cost was about $37,000, and EQIP paid about $3,200 of that. So let's see here. Looking at moving forward now, more recently, I reapplied for EQIP for some different acreage than we treated in the past. And this time I paired EQIP and CSP together. So you can see this management unit in green down here. This is Douglas fir plantation that comes down a very wet hillside, and the Douglas fir is transitioning into alder, a lot of naturally regenerated alder in there, very high stocking density. So under EQIP, I applied for pre-commercial thinning, about 20 acres, and then stacked into that pre-commercial thinning some habitat structure enhancements. So creating habitat piles, and EQIP will pay for 1 pile per 5 acres. So I've got payments for 4 habitat piles. They also pay for 2 snags per acre. So we're taking trees that are at least 12 inches in diameter at breast height or larger and girdling those to create snags. And then we're also creating 20 down logs, so 1 down log per acre. And that's just cutting a tree that's at least 12 inches in diameter, cutting it down, limbing it to get the log laying down the ground. That's what I was doing today, was marking those trees for the pre-commercial thinning crew that's coming this weekend. So they can work through, they'll PCT everything, create these habitat structures kind of all in one pass. Then to pair CSP with this, we'll be following all of that up, since this is largely a hardwood dominated stand with just a little bit of residual conifer in there. With CSP, we're using the planting for a high carbon sequestration enhancement to come in and underplant all of this with shade tolerant conifers. Hemlock, cedar, spruce, grand fir, in the sense there are some gaps in there, a little bit of Douglas fir and a little bit of white pine. So to take a look at the payment rates for that, the 20 acres, a little bit over 20 acres, pre-commercial thinning, we receive $340 per acre. EQIP, that totals about 6,800 acres. This is speculative right now, but I'm estimating that the crew is going to cost about $250 an acre. So again, the EQIP payment rate is higher than what I expect the actual cost to be. And then you can see the payment rates for the habitat structures. I put 0 in there because initially I was going to go in and do all of those myself. I'm going to have the crews do them. There really shouldn't be too much more expense for them making these different habitat structures. They go pretty quickly. But again, for this 20 acres, total EQIP payment of about $13,000, and a cost to me of about $5,000. So quite a bit of cost savings there that I can use for other projects. Then the CSP, and this is where I think a lot of eyes will start opening up. Planting for a high carbon sequestration rate. So coming in and underplanting all of this, that includes site preparation, planting the trees, putting cages on the trees. CSP pays $1,700 an acre for a total of $34,000. I'm anticipating the cost to only be about $10,000 to get the planting done. Then every year for 5 years, we're receiving a stewardship payment of an additional $1,000. But I will have some more out-of-pocket expense in the future. You know, having a crew come in and do the either herbicide or manual seedling release for at least 3 years until those seedlings can get up above the brush. So again, looking at over a 5-year time frame, about $40,000 or about $20,000 in cost and about $40,000 in payment. So you know, CSP can really work out tremendously well. And I think what I think is what's handy about this is, again, if some things, some projects will cost more than EQIP pays you, some may cost less. Hopefully you can work things out so things kind of come out in the wash in the long run. And you'll have to stay tuned. I'll tell you how this actually works out, and I'll know that shortly here within the next couple of weeks. So I'm going to leave it at that. And let's see, let's take just a couple minutes and see if there's any questions either for Rachel or myself, Rachel about her program, or myself about EQIP and CSP. And then Alex, if you want to dip your hand into the hat and start pulling names out, we'll put people on the spot and get them talking about their program. So let's just take a few minutes of Q&A. Are there any questions in the chat? Or if people have live questions also, you can unmute and feel free to ask.
Gordon asked this question, and I think Tony actually answered it in the chat already, but is there EQIP available for replacing blackberries or invasives with tree seedlings, and how much control do they have over the choice of species in the planting plan? They being NRCS.
Great question. Yeah, so in that case, the way that would be handled is through a brush management practice, so coming in and cutting back the brush, and then a separate site preparation practice, and then a third tree and shrub planting practice. So you can get 3 payment rates to convert your blackberry patch into native trees and shrubs. You asked what kind of control they have. Under EQIP, you do have to use native plants. So, but that's about it. So you could be planting cherry and elderberry and dogwood and things like that that provide pollinator habitat, or you could be putting it back into timber like I've been doing, so cedar, hemlock, or a mix of all the above. So you're restoring a very diverse forest habitat right from the get-go. So you have a tremendous amount of flexibility in that regards. They just have to be native plant stock, plant species. Any other questions? Okay, and happy to take questions as we go along, but I promised that I'd turn the talking stick over, and here I go again, sucking up most of the air in the room. But so Alex, who's bravely raised their hand? I wouldn't even mind starting with Tony if
yeah, let's start with Tony.
I,
she is the first one to raise her hand.
Fantastic. Hi, Tony. Nice to see you.
Hi, nice to see you. Yeah, Kirk, thank you. You kind of got me started on this journey, and it's great to be following up with all of you.
I'm glad I don't have to apologize for that. You sound like you're happy. So
I am. And I just have to say, I've been really pleased with the NRCS staff, people that come to help me, and my local Mason County Conservation District Forester. She helped me out with a lot of really great suggestions. Behind me is one of my habitat piles and my dog. That way. Anyway, and that I had a big pile of brush over the years that we, from when we cleared our land, from when we developed it, and it was growing over. And one day I decided to rent an excavator and clear it out, and I had all these stumps and root wads, and I found out that nobody was interested in them for stream restoration projects because they're really old. They're not ideal for that kind of use. And so Margaret from the Conservation District said, well, you can make habitat piles. And so I got a link to your great video, Kirk, about how to build habitat piles. And I had an EQIP grant to do pre-commercial thinning. So I was able to use a combination of all those old root wads and some of the stuff from the pre-commercial thinning, rented an excavator again and put in 3 piles. And my other EQIP project was, I don't know if you remember that Blackberry area when you come driving in my driveway on the right. And it was just, a nightmare. So I was able to get funding to get a crew to come in, actually a father and son that did the clearing. They also did the PCT work. And so they've done some treatments afterwards, and they planted with cedar, and then I went in and interplanted with native shrubs and things. That was also part of EQIP funding. I think the biggest challenge was finding the contractor, and when I did, I was really happy. They've worked out great. They work for a logging company out of Kelso, but they do this on the weekends to earn extra pocket money, so it's been a great experience overall.
Great. Great. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, you just reminded me of a couple little details. I'm sure this will happen as we keep talking. So let's see. One of them, as you may be gathering by now, you can do the work yourself, or you can hire a contractor or some combination thereof. Yeah. So Tony, in this case, did some of the work herself, created some of the habitat piles with the excavator, hired a father-son team to come in and do some of the other work. On my land, like I mentioned, got a pre-commercial thinning crew coming in to thin the 20 acres, a planting crew to come in and plant after that. All of the alder PCT that had been done under the original EQIP contract, I did all that myself. And therefore, no expense as long as I, not paying myself anything, which I still haven't quite figured out how to make my tree farm LLC pay me yet, but having a lot of fun. And so, it doesn't matter who does it as long as it's done to the NRCS specifications. So that's one thing. And then back to Gordon's question also. So even though I said under EQIP, all the plants have to be native. Under CSP, that's not the case. So knowing that you are inclined towards agroforestry like I am, the wildlife hedgerow that I planted, I included chestnut. And I know you love chestnuts.
Yeah.
Hornbeam. Not that I'll ever be making, wagon wheel spokes or anything. Hornbeam was a traditional English tree for making wagon wheel spokes, but whatever, it's cool. What else I plant? Black walnut, beech, birch, and a few other non-native. All of them I was able to justify because they provide some kind of wildlife food source. So, hence the wildlife hedgerow, but clearly not native trees. So there you've got a lot of flexibility under CSP. Okay, with that, who else is bravely raising their hand to share an anecdote?
Gordon did, and Richard did.
Well, Gordon, since I was just calling you out,
Yeah. Well, sure. What we did, and Kirk, of course, you will probably remember this. We created a update, really a totally rewritten and revamped forest management plan with EQIP funding. So that was really helpful. I had written a plan originally, but this was a lot more professionally done, and there's a lot more possibilities for using the land written into that plan. A lot of ideas that NNRG put forward that we wouldn't have thought of. So it's it's a valuable thing to have done.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for underscoring the forest management plan aspect of that. So just a quick aside on that. NNRG again NRCS provides a set reimbursement rate depending on the size of your land for a forest management plan. And you can go hire a qualified forester to do that. And I say qualified because that forester has to be registered with the NRCS as what's called a technical service provider in order to write a forest management plan paid for by EQIP. It just so happens that NNRG has foresters that are technical service providers. So if you do get EQIP funding, we'd be happy to work with you on a forest management plan for your land. And Gordon mentioned, they tend to be very comprehensive. They identify all of the projects that are EQIP fundable. So they're kind of baked into the management plan. Makes it easy for you, makes it easy for the NRCS when you go to apply for funding. The NRCS takes your management plan, pulls all of the practices, the EQIP funded practices out of there, immediately plops them into a contract, turns that around to you to review, and then on you go, implementing your practices. So it's pretty slick that way. Richard, what have you done with EQIP?
Oh, you're on mute, Richard.
We've done two rounds of EQIP, and both in different areas of the same property. And we were primarily interested in clearing the areas that had become overgrown with vine maple and Scotch broom and Himalayan blackberries and other undesirables. And that's what we were primarily interested in doing, and found a contractor willing to do that. And then, as you said, coincidentally, you also look through the procedures and find things that are higher revenues that are pretty easy to do to try to make the equation work a little better for you. Because as I remember, the reimbursement rate was definitely insufficient for the land clearing by itself. So I remember particularly doing the wildlife piles and bird boxes. And bird boxes turned out to be a real winner all around. We found a school for developmentally disabled students, and they were hungry for projects that could be productive. And our bird box project, I think, was one of their favorites for the year. They got a check out of it. We got a series of, I think, 28 bird boxes to put up. So that was a win beyond the EQIP program. The only other thing I remember from the experience, and probably doesn't apply to a lot of people on the call tonight, but if you happen to be, if your timberland is owned as a corporation, you should be prepared for an extraordinary amount of paperwork that you're just not used to doing. I'm used to signing on behalf of the corporation. Federal government would like every shareholder to sign extensive documents, which was challenging, and an inordinate amount of suspicion that you are applying not just in one county in Washington, but in many counties over the whole country, and you are exploiting the government in some way. So just know that probably happened, and the federal government got burned, and they're pretty determined never to have that happen again.
I'm glad you mentioned that. That's a good point. So if you own your land, say in an LLC or some other kind of corporate structure, absolutely right. There's gonna be a whole other layer of paperwork. We just transitioned all of our family forest lands into an LLC, and to transition the EQIP contracts, the CSP contracts, the farm records, and all of that, we had to go through the whole spanking machine again and fill out an amazing amount of documentation for that. But just so people don't run away screaming, you only have to do that once.
Right.
So then you're in the system, your business is in the system. And then, like I've been doing on my land, about every 5 years, reapplying for EQIP or CSP to tinker with something a little bit different. With 200 acres of land now in our family, I can't do everything all at once. So I'm kind of choosing, 20 acres over this 5 years, another 20 acres over that 5 years. And always then, this is kind of how we're getting some of our cash flow coming into the property, is with these types of projects. And as you can see, some of them again pay more than the actual cost. So it can be very handy. Not a guarantee that that'll happen, but who else?
We didn't do as well on the finances as you did. And you're right, most of the paperwork is up front, so that's certainly not a reason not to do it. It's just something to be aware of. There are a couple of things that are ongoing, like you have to maintain a Dun and Bradstreet number, and you have to register with a particular branch of the government called, I think, SAM, in which they know how to pay you. And that's another challenge in itself. But there is one particular fun part of that. One of the questions gives you a choice of what type of organization you are. And one of the choices on there is top secret clearance. That you are a government entity with top secret clearance. And I wanted so badly to be able to mark that. I had to pass it by, but it was just fun to fill out a government form where they were asking if I had top secret clearance.
Somehow I missed that. That's great. That's great. All right. Yeah. Who else do we have to pick on?
Rhonda in chat said that they applied for EQIP but are waiting for approval, but they do have DNR funding for brush control, which is
great.
interesting.
Yeah,
That'd be an interesting one to talk about.
Yeah,
So
different program.
So we actually don't yet have the DNR brush control funding, because the DNR people are waiting for the EQIP people. And we just keep waiting and waiting. And I don't know how long it's going to take, but the goal originally was for the DNR to fill the gap, because once we get EQIP, it's not going to start. We can't get funding for any activities before May. And so the idea for the DNR was to get DNR funding to bridge the gap. But DNR can't do it until EQIP has made its decision. And we're kind of in limbo. We don't really know why. We applied in November, we're still waiting. One snag we ran into was that the person in charge of the Southwest, I think it is, Kirk, I told you about this. He changed, that position changed, a different person was hired, and he does things differently than the previous person. And so we had started this process under the previous person. And so midstream, we were told that we fail to meet the requirements because we don't have a project map. And I mean, it took us like 10 minutes to create project map, but the caseworker, I don't know what you call her, but she wasn't, it was just a difficult few hours there. We were told we weren't gonna comply with anything, so.
Okay. Yeah, I think the best we can say about this is it is a federal bureaucracy, so you do have to be prepared for that. That's why I call it the spanking machine. Is, man, they kind of hit you from every which direction, and you still didn't do it right. So that's why I also encourage people to get started very, very early. So presumably, if there's an October cutoff deadline, again, start the application process as soon as possible to hopefully, hit some of these different little sticky points and work through them. Like any federal agency that runs a program like this, program rules change from year to year, every couple of years. And I think, Rhonda, what you're describing is something that must have changed in the past year. Because I know as an applicant, I've never had to submit my own map. That's always something that has been worked out with the NRCS representative who's managing the contract, that they come out, they look at the land, see what you want to do, they generate a map of the different practices. So that's just been part of the application process.
That's kind of what we thought had happened.
Yeah.
Like we had done all of that and then it changed midstream. They didn't notify us for a pretty long.
Okay.
But I'd say the biggest impact of the delays is there's lots of projects that we would have started now and we're not allowed to start them or we'll be disqualified.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of put it in limbo.
Yeah. You bring up a good detail there also, Chad, that folks often ask me, well, can I just get started on a project and then get reimbursed later when I have an EQIP contract? And you can't. So if you do want to get reimbursement for something, you cannot start on that project until you have an EQIP contract that authorizes the funding for that project. So yeah, that could keep you in limbo for a while, because again, even like I mentioned, even if you apply, it's not a guarantee of funding. You have to wait for the application deadline, wait for the ranking process, and then wait for that letter that tells you whether or not you've been approved. And I didn't mention that part of the application timeline. So if you apply, say by the fall cutoff deadline, usually by early spring, March, April at the latest of the following year, you'll receive a letter saying, whether or not your application has been approved. And then it can still take another month or so to get the contract in place. So if you apply by October and you're approved for funding, you likely won't be able to start on anything, even a forest management plan, until I would say about June of the following year. So it can take a good 6-8 months to work through the whole application ranking approval process. So that's something you got to plan for way in advance and really stay on the NRCS folks. They change jobs a lot. It seems like that's been happening a lot lately too, and things get lost in the cracks. So
what you're saying is that our 4-month wait is a normal thing, and that it may be a couple more months before we hear.
Let's see. So yeah, where are we at here? So if you applied by the October deadline, then yes, then I wouldn't expect to receive a letter authorizing that you've been approved until probably March or so. I know with the clients that I'm working with right now, they're working directly with their NRCS representatives to put together that draft contract that details, the practices, the payment rates, the schedule. I've been just working that out with our local NRCS person over the past few weeks. And she said she had to get all of that done, I think by last week or so, in order to then have that application go through the ranking process. So presumably right now, ranking is happening.
Okay.
And then, yeah, you should get a letter, in March or so. And you can always, contact your NRCS representative. They might know before the letters go out.
Okay,
But yeah.
thanks.
Well, it's past 8:30. I certainly don't mind hanging a little longer. If there's anybody else that has any specific questions about these programs or wants to share some anecdotes, for those of you that, if the evening's getting late, I certainly respect that, and you're welcome to go. Thank you for joining us. But for anybody else that wants to hang out for a few more minutes, I'm game and happy to answer any more questions or hear some more stories.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What is the climate change EQIP program? Is that what you're asking about? Carbon sequestration EQIP project.
So I don't know of any carbon sequestration project that's funded by EQIP, but the one that I'm using is funded by the Conservation Stewardship Program. So if that's what you're referring to, yeah. So there's a lot of flexibility with that. The sort of the basic gist of it is that you are altering your forest condition, your forest composition, to improve carbon sequestration. So, two examples that come to mind right away. One is if you have an area that doesn't have any trees on it, let's say it's dominated by brush, or maybe it's an agricultural field or something like that, just simply planting trees into that, and trees that are known to sequester carbon for the long term. So typically conifers, it would be one way to qualify for that. The other is, and this would definitely, I think, apply to your land, because it's very similar to some of the hardwood and brush stand types that I have on our Bakota land, is again, coming in and cutting back a lot of that undergrowth, the vine maple, the other shrubs, cutting back some of the storm damage and defective, hardwood. So you're really opening the canopy, in other words, and then coming back in and planting a combination of shade tolerant, shade intolerant conifers would help, or would set that stand on a long-term carbon sequestration trajectory. So like you saw in the financials for mine, I'm getting paid $1,700 an acre to do that. So for that $1,700, I have to do the site preparation. So I've got hand crews out there right now with chainsaws cutting all the brush back and then cutting down the defective trees. So there's the site preparation, and then there's the planting of the trees, so buying the materials and hiring a crew to plant them. And then you have an obligation to maintain those seedlings for, I believe it's a 10-year window of time. And so maintenance, usually if you've got higher productivity soils, like I know you do, I do on my land, you're cutting back competing vegetation around those seedlings for at least, the first 3 years until those seedlings, reach a free to grow height above the brush. So either you're doing that yourself or you're hiring a crew to do that. And that's where you need to kind of work out all of those finances and make sure that that $1,700 an acre is, going to cover all that. Or if there's some out of pocket, that you're comfortable with whatever that extra cost is.
Mm-hmm.
We were told that we can't do CSP until we've gotten EQIP programs done.
Yeah, so that's, like I mentioned at the beginning, that's usually the case. It's kind of a 1-2 step like that. So, with EQIP in this case, you can do a lot of those same practices. And what I would be looking at is the payment rates for site preparation, tree planting, and seedling release, and see they may add up to close to that $1,700. And you might be able to get all that accomplished through EQIP. But yeah, usually you have to do some of the tune-up with EQIP first. And that seems to vary. I know a few folks that have just gone straight into CSP. And I think what the key is with CSP is you have to show, and you have to document some degree of stewardship that precedes the CSP contract. So, for those of you that haven't done anything yet, you don't go straight to CSP. You use EQIP to tune things up and then go to CSP. But if you have some kind of documented, it doesn't have to be EQIP funded, but if you've been doing work yourself out there and can show that you have invested in some stewardship activities on your land, that may pre-qualify you for CSP. Anybody else have questions about EQIP or CSP or any other anecdotes to share?
I would be curious if anyone has planted Western larch west of the Cascades and how it does. Or is it used, and would that be considered a native species, even though it's not west of the Cascades?
Man, I'd love to hear an answer to that also, because I've been thinking the same thing. What a great, presumably great climate adaptation species. I thought about planting a larch on a project that I'm working on, but just, didn't quite get the tree seedling order in time to our DNR nursery. But I see it growing on the west side. There's some that I pass all the time heading south of Olympia, so it'll
Okay.
grow over here.
Well, it's a very fast growing tree, right? It puts on a lot of biomass.
Yeah, and I think I think an argument could be made on the right kind of soils. I would assume that it likes, a drier site, maybe more well-draining soils. We're starting to recommend sequoia and redwood, and on some of these challenging sites that don't support other species. So I would consider, would the NRCS consider that still native, even though it's endemic to the east side? I don't know. Native to the northwest.
Sure.
Native in the historical pollen record. I mean, how far back do we need to go with native? We can argue that redwoods are native in the northwest because they were here more than 10,000 years ago. But I haven't had that argument yet with the NRCS.
Okay.
I did try it once years ago. Our local conservation district, for their plant sale, I bought some larch and they didn't make it, but I'm here in Shelton where it rains a lot more than a lot of other places. So,
Okay.
Well, anybody else? We're 10 past our usual ending time. I mean, I love talking with y'all, but unless anybody has any burning questions, we'll let you go and say thank you.
Thanks.
That's it. Okay. And thank you again, Rachel, for joining us. Again, folks that want to learn more about the conservation portal funding and technical assistance portal that she's working on, contact her directly or check out the website that she's put into the chat, and lots of great resources for folks out there. So take advantage of it.
Thanks for having me in Cascades Landscape Club.
Attacked by cats. All right. Well, thanks, everybody. Have a great night. Thanks for joining us. Look forward to seeing you at the next month Fireside Chat.
Thanks, everyone.